Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and this is my story. I had just moved to New York, chasing what I thought was the opportunity of a lifetime. I had landed a job as a personal assistant for one of Manhattan's wealthiest families. The Whitmore's mansion was breathtaking, marble floors that gleamed, glass walls reflecting the city lights, chandeliers that sparkled like they belonged in a palace. Walking through those doors, I thought I had finally made it. But as soon as I stepped inside, a strange tension wrapped around me. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air felt heavier than any apartment or office I had been in before. It wasn't fear exactly, it was anticipation. I didn't know then how much my life was about to shift. Before I go further, tell me in the comments which city you're watching this from. And if you want more real-life stories like mine, don't forget to subscribe. From day one, I felt watched. Not in an obvious way, but in those little ways that make your skin crawl. Mrs. Whitmore, the matriarch, would smile at me, but her eyes never reached mine. She asked questions with a tone that suggested I was always a step away from doing something wrong. And Mr. Whitmore, he had a way of making his attention feel like weight pressing down on me, measuring me silently with every word I spoke. The house staff were another story. They weren't unfriendly, but their quiet glances, the subtle shift of a head when I entered a room, the way conversations paused just long enough for me to notice, they all made me feel like I was being tested constantly. I tried to convince myself it was nerves. I reminded myself that I was here to work, to prove myself. But the little things kept piling up. A silver tray not polished perfectly. Towels folded slightly uneven. A single misstep, and suddenly the tension in the room felt unbearable. And then there was Daniel. Daniel worked closely with the Whitmores, though his title didn't matter much. At first, he seemed like a safe presence. He complimented my work, made me feel like someone noticed me, someone actually cared. I had no family in the city, no friends nearby. Slowly, I began to rely on him emotionally, trusting his words and presence more than I should have. The first time I noticed something was off, he brushed it off as a joke. He commented on the way I dressed, the way I smiled. It wasn't anything overt, at least not yet, but it made me aware of his gaze lingering too long. I felt confused, unsure whether I was imagining things. But there were moments that unsettled me deep down. Weeks passed, and my world shifted again. I discovered I was pregnant. My heart sank. Fear and panic gripped me. I had always been careful. I had planned, or at least I thought I had. I wasn't ready, not here, not with him, not in this house that already seemed designed to trap me. Daniel's reaction was colder than I expected. Calm, precise, almost rehearsed. If anyone finds out, your job will be over. Your life here will be over, he said. And just like that, everything changed. I could feel the Whitmore's attention sharpening. They didn't say anything aloud, but suddenly every glance, every subtle question, every instruction seemed to carry a hidden accusation. I knew they doubted me, and I knew Daniel had orchestrated this. At first, I wanted to run, to leave the house and never look back. But I couldn't. Not yet. Leaving meant losing my independence, giving up the life I had started building. Staying meant walking through a house full of whispers, hidden judgments, and subtle threats. I started to take notes, quietly. Small things I noticed each day. Whispered conversations, the way Mrs. Whitmore's gaze lingered too long when I entered a room, the way Daniel's hand would brush mine, by accident. I needed proof, something tangible to protect myself. One evening, when the house was quiet, I found a small camera tucked in the corner of the dining room, a corner Daniel always claimed was off-limits. It had recorded everything. Every look, every subtle maneuver, every whispered accusation. I realized then that I wasn't powerless. Not completely. I began piecing together the reality of the house, of the people I worked for, of Daniel. The manipulation, the threats, the way they had tried to turn everyone against me, it was all part of a calculated plan. And now I had the first pieces of evidence to fight back. The nights became the hardest. Lying in my small apartment after long days, trying to sleep, trying to remember that I deserved more than fear and manipulation. I would remind myself that I was strong, that I had survived challenges before, that I could survive this too. Sometimes, Daniel would approach with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It doesn't have to be hard," he'd say, voice low and calm. "Just don't make it harder than it already is." I knew exactly what he meant. But for the first time, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt before: control. I realized that while they tried to manipulate me, I could also make choices, protect myself, and speak my truth when the time was right. After the initial shock, I began noticing how carefully the Whitmores observed me. Every minor action felt scrutinized, like they were searching for mistakes that weren't there. I started to feel invisible and exposed at the same time, like a character in a play whose lines I didn't fully understand. Daniel became more persistent. At first, his attention had been flattering, almost comforting. Now, it felt like a trap. Every word, every gesture seemed designed to pull me deeper into a web I couldn't escape. I wanted to trust him, to believe he cared for me, but a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that something was off. I tried to push it aside. Then came the day when the house seemed to shift entirely against me. A silver necklace had gone missing from Mrs. Whitmore's room. I had no idea where it could have gone, but somehow all eyes fell on me. No accusations, no direct words, just looks and sighs, whispers just low enough for me to hear, but never enough to respond. I felt my heart pound in my chest. I wanted to scream, to explain, but the atmosphere in the house made it impossible. Daniel's expression was unreadable. He didn't say anything, but I could see the unspoken message. I was alone. The tension made me hyper-aware of everything I did. Every tray I carried, every errand I ran, every interaction with the staff became a careful calculation. I kept thinking, one wrong move and I'm done. Weeks passed and my isolation grew. I stopped speaking much outside of work tasks, stopped asking questions, stopped letting anyone see the worry that was slowly consuming me. I became a shadow in a house full of polished surfaces and polite smiles. Then came the whisper I hadn't expected. Daniel's advice became more manipulative. He started showing me how much he cared, while reminding me that if anyone found out about the pregnancy, I would lose everything. At first, it was subtle, almost like concern. Then it became pressure, constant and unrelenting. I remember one night, after a particularly long day, he cornered me in the hallway. "You know, Sarah," he said, voice low, almost casual, "it doesn't have to be this hard. But you need to understand, you can't trust anyone else here. Not the staff. Not the family. Not even yourself." I wanted to push back, to walk away, but something inside me froze. It wasn't fear exactly, it was the realization of how alone I was. Alone in a city, in a mansion, in a life that I thought I had control over. At that point, I started documenting everything more aggressively. Not just the subtle glances or hushed whispers, but every interaction with Daniel, every suspicious look from Mrs. Whitmore, every word that could be interpreted as a threat. My phone became my secret diary, my lifeline, and my evidence. And the manipulations didn't stop. Mrs. Whitmore began delegating small tasks that seemed harmless at first, but were actually traps. A misplaced vase, a missing glass, anything that could be twisted into evidence that I was careless. I realized how meticulously the house had been designed to keep me on edge, to make me doubt myself, and to give them all the power. But I also realized something else. I was learning. I was learning how to survive under pressure, how to navigate the invisible rules of this house, how to protect myself without revealing my fear. I discovered a quiet strength inside me I didn't know existed. Then one afternoon, Daniel dropped a comment that hit me like a punch. "Just remember, Sarah, your career here, your life, even your choices, they're fragile. Don't test me." The words weren't just a threat, they were a warning. I felt anger bubble up inside me, but I held it down, carefully, quietly, plotting my next steps. I began to find small victories. A note left in my favor, a sympathetic glance from a staff member, proof of my innocence in little incidents. Each one was a reminder that I wasn't completely powerless. And yet, the larger battle loomed. The pregnancy, the emotional manipulation, the constant tension, It all built towards something I couldn't avoid forever. One evening, alone in the living room, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I thought about my family back home, about the life I had left behind, and about the woman I wanted to be. I realized that survival wasn't just about getting through the days, it was about preparing to take control of my own story. I didn't know exactly how or when, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let anyone, not Daniel, not the Whitmores, not anyone in this house, dictate my life. I would find a way to speak my truth. I would reclaim my power. And as I sat there alone with my thoughts, I realized that even in a house designed to break me, I was quietly, steadily building my own strength. By the time the 3rd month of my pregnancy came around, the tension in the Whitmore mansion had reached a peak I could barely breathe under. Every glance felt sharper, every instruction weighed heavier. I had learned to navigate the house like a tightrope walker, one false step and everything could collapse. Daniel, whose charm had once seemed comforting, now felt like a predator in disguise. He had moments of kindness, but they were always followed by subtle manipulations, threats thinly veiled as advice. "Remember, Sarah," he whispered one evening, "some things you just have to keep to yourself." You wouldn't want anyone making life harder than it already is. The house had become a battlefield, each room a front line. Mrs. Whitmore had grown more openly suspicious. Small items disappeared, minor mistakes were magnified, and the staff began whispering behind closed doors. I knew I couldn't last much longer just staying quiet. I had to act, but carefully. Every step had to be calculated. I began compiling proof. Not just mental notes, but photos, screenshots, and recordings of interactions that showed the truth. Every manipulation, every attempt to make me look incompetent or guilty, was documented. I realized that Daniel's power over me depended entirely on secrecy. If the truth came out, his control would vanish. Then came the confrontation I had been preparing for. Daniel cornered me one night in the hallway, the house eerily silent around us. "You're making this more difficult than it has to be," he said, voice deceptively calm. But I had changed. I no longer felt the fear that had dominated me in the early weeks. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I said, my voice steady, my hands no longer trembling. "I know what you've done, and I have proof." His smile faltered, just for a second. For the first time, I saw the crack in his armor. That moment gave me the courage to push further. I realized that control wasn't just about surviving. It was about claiming my power back. The next days were tense. Daniel's behavior shifted subtly, almost nervously. The Whitmores began to question him too, noticing inconsistencies that had previously been invisible. I stayed calm, professional, and silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. Then came the turning point. During a family gathering, a small comment from a staff member revealed a detail only Daniel could have orchestrated. Eyes widened, whispers circulated, and suddenly, I wasn't the one under suspicion anymore. The realization washed over me like a wave. David's manipulations were unraveling. I finally had the moment to reclaim my narrative. I presented my documented proof carefully, showing the chain of manipulations, threats, and subtle abuses. It wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. I was determined to walk out with my dignity intact, with control over my life restored. After that, the atmosphere shifted. Daniel's authority crumbled, replaced by quiet acknowledgement of what had been happening. Mrs. Whitmore, still reserved, offered a nod of understanding, the first sign that she might recognize the pressure I had endured. I felt a strange mix of relief, exhaustion, and empowerment. I had survived the house, the threats, the manipulation. But more importantly, I had learned something vital. Power is not given, it's claimed. Silence may protect for a moment, but speaking the truth, standing firm, and documenting reality creates the path to freedom. Looking back, I can't believe how much I grew in those months. I arrived in New York scared, alone, and hopeful. I faced betrayal, manipulation, and fear. But I came out stronger. And if you're listening to this, I want you to know, no matter the pressure, no matter the threats, no one can take your truth from you. Claim it, hold it, and never let it go. Because surviving isn't just about staying alive. It's about standing tall, even when the world is trying to push you down. And I did.